Hello guys, this is Project England Rising, and today I'm here with James Desborough, who is a leftist, a left-wing anarchist. As you all know, I've been wanting to get a leftist on for a while, and I first came across James. Some of you might have seen his videos. The first time I came across him was a video he did on white genocide, where he rejected the premise that white genocide is happening. I think the video was posted on the Right Stuff or something like that. And I commented on that video like in a pretty white nationalistic way. And then James like replied back in an articulate, really civil like fashion, which surprised me a bit. So that struck me about him. So later on, I went back just to see what his politics were going like, and I saw that he was a leftist who like believed in like freedom of speech and stuff like that, which like made him stand out from others. So that kind of got me interested in him, and I subscribed to him and started watching his stuff. So yeah, if you've got any questions, he's willing to answer any questions you've got. So just ask him in the chat and I'll put him to him. But James, thank you for coming on, man, by the way, because there's not really many leftists who do this, probably. Well, I'm not sure because I've not really had one on before, but
there'd be a few. I expect a lot of them would just want to argue with you. I'm sure we'll have things we disagree on, but you know, I think if we don't talk, it just makes things worse. So, yeah.
Well, if you would, can you just tell people what you identify as politically, and also how you got into politics, if you don't mind?
No, that's fine. Okay, my viewpoints are kind of shifting around at the moment, but I'll stick with what I have been for the longest time. I'd identify myself as a left anarchist, ideologically. Pragmatically, I'm more of a socialist, and over and above any other beliefs that I happen to have, pragmatism tends to trump them. So, you know, I don't think anarchism is possible yet, but it's the ideal I would like to see in the future. For the time being, I see socialism as offering the greatest opportunity to the greatest number of people, and the greatest freedom to the greatest number of people. So that's why I look at that. Or there's some other reasons, some practical and scientific reasons. I guess I've always been interested in politics for as long as, you know, as long as a child could be interested in politics. I remember at primary school making the anti-Thatcher posters and getting in trouble. In art class. Yeah, that was primary school. My dad was quite a big influence. He was always shouting at the TV when politicians were doing something stupid. So yeah, there was that. So I've always been interested, and I'm sure you'll touch on later. I'm a game designer, so from a sort of world building and history perspective, you know, that always tweaked my interest there as well. So yeah, I was always interested in history as well. And at college I studied history and politics, and I've just stayed interested ever since, really. I mean, it's how things work or don't is always interesting.
So like there's a lot to talk about in them years, like when you've been through your political years, but like as the world stands now with everything that is happening, what are your thoughts on like the train wreck basically from all angles of what is happening at the moment in the world in general?
God, it's just one of those periods where everything is in flux, and everything you thought you knew and was kind of set and settled is all moving again. But things at the same time are so fundamentally different to any previous point in history that it's really interesting. It's terrifying, a lot of it at the same time, but it's really interesting because you can't really underestimate sorry, you can't really overestimate, no, underestimate. Oh, you can't underestimate how much impact the internet has had on politics. I mean, you look at the Arab Spring, you look at the way elections are being fought now. You know, Donald Trump's camp are really winning it on the memes and things, but you know, Hillary's paying out millions and millions of dollars to people to operate online for her. You know, that you've got the Chinese government and the Russian government paying people to troll forums and leave comments and stuff. You know, this is all known stuff. Yeah. And you got, you know, WikiLeaks just recently dropped all that stuff about the Democratic Congress in the States as well. Yeah, that's changed everything, and it's also brought people together across international borders. So, you know, you're as likely to fall in love with a girl from Estonia as you are from the girl down the road these days, you know. So it's had such a profound political, social and economic impact that the kind of things that are happening now, happening in that context, is unprecedented. So I don't know, it's interesting times.
Well, like, just looking at things as they are now, do you think that things are going to end up being okay? And also, what would be the ideal direction for society to go, in your view?
Those are big questions.
Yeah, quite big questions.
I think barring all-out thermonuclear war, I think the human race will survive, carry on, thrive in one way or another. We're a bloody tenacious species, because of our access to technology and knowledge. So, you know, one way or another, I think, barring absolute disaster, we'll do okay. The way I would like to see things moving, I would like to see things moving in a kind of Star Trek utopian kind of way. You know, bring the world together, see ourselves as human first before anything else.
Yeah.
See that we have more in common. Work together, combine our resources, you know, because if we can get off this rock and just out into the solar system, you know, we'll become hugely wealthy as a species, and you know, the sky's the limit at that point. But you got to set aside your tribal differences and get off this rock to achieve our full potential, and that seems a long way off at the moment.
Well, that what you've just said, that, like, I love that. Like, I'm really into sci-fi and stuff like that, and I've thought about it in that kind of way. But, and this is just like touching on the race question, which we'll utterly disagree on. Do you think, I mean, this is my view, we could have that future, that Star Trek future and everything like that, but because we whites are going to be a minority in our own nations, like pretty soon, none of that is going to happen because there's going to be no whites to realize it.
Okay, yeah, this is where we disagree. I don't think race is that fundamentally important when it comes to these issues. And yeah, we're gonna violently disagree on that. But if I can just briefly explain why I think that. The reason I think that is because I think it's the culture that we produced that is more important. It's the scientific method. It's the knowledge we've accrued. It's the ability to apply technology. And I think we were lucky. I don't think it's inherent in our nature as a race, because the differences between the races are so really very minor, very edge kind of things, that culture's far more important. I mean, you look at what the Chinese are accomplishing now in terms of space travel and so on. They're probably there's a good chance they'll get to Mars before Elon Musk or anyone else, you know. And you look at places where if you think about it, you know, kind of we exported our culture. Places like India, you know, they're up and coming fast. So I think it's more to do with once you deal with poverty, once you deal with malnutrition, once you sell people on the idea that these cultural values and so on are valuable and rewarding, then I think you lift everyone up, and that benefits us all.
Okay, but like you've picked an example there with the Chinese, who they are intelligent and they are doing good things, and they are also they are still a homogenous nation, which probably has something to do with that. Do you think?
China is odd. I probably should have chosen a better example. India is probably a better example because it is really lots of different cultures kind of banded together. And the same is true of China, but they've had like 10,000 years to kind of beat everyone into a homogenous flat lump, really. China has basically been the same for about 10,000 years. It's just every now and again they kind of rearrange the furniture and, you know, kick out the emperor and put the party chairman in instead. So there's a continuity and a stability to China that's rare everywhere else. Now you can see that as a bonus, but I mean the reason they took such a beating in the 1800s and 1900s is because they were so isolationist. You know, they weren't exposed to new technologies and ideas, and so they got steamrollered by other cultures like Japan, who, you know, embraced Western technology and applied it to horrific effect. So yeah, maybe China wasn't the best case, but I do think.
Oh, okay, well, but do you honestly? I mean, I'm gonna try and say this in a most unoffensive way I can. Do you honestly think that us whites are the same as blacks and Muslims? Like
in every, well, Muslim's not a race for a start. So do you mean Arabs?
Well, I kind of see Islam as a brown pan-nationalist entity as well as a religion. But I suppose Arabs. Yeah,
there's
Arabs.
kind of a sidetrack, but I have to object whenever anyone says Islam's a race.
Right.
It's a combination of religion and ideologies. I mean, I'm an atheist, so I'm no sympathy for Islam at all. I just would object to it being called a race. Okay, so do I think we're the same? I mean, there are obvious.
Sorry for interrupting you. Like, for instance, if you look at Africa, they're still living in huts and things like that. And I'm not saying I'm not putting them down for this. Like, my main problem is the fact they are in our nations and raping us, women and children and things like that. But if you look at the nations, we're still building huts. Whereas you look at our race, we've gone to space and stuff like that. You could never imagine blacks or Muslims doing something like that, could you?
Well, didn't Iran launch a Quran into orbit? It just shows sense of priorities, I think. You know, we had our dark period like this as well, you know, the Dark Ages, and it took the Renaissance and, you know, a bunch of philosophers and mystics and so on being burnt at the stake and whatever for us to get free of that. So I have some sympathy for the problems in the Muslim world that are brought about by religion, which I feel is holding them back. But to go back to the original question, I mean, there's obvious superficial differences between the races. You know, different amounts of melanin in the skin, different eye configurations, hair types, and so on. You know, Northern Europeans tend to have lactose tolerance. Yeah, and there's possible genetic historical reasons for that. But by and large, the differences are very minor. So yeah, and you can find brilliant people and stupid people in every race. I think the problems in Africa, it's kind. I'm just trying to think how to explain this. To me, I look at Africa, and as a hoary old leftist, I see the class wealth divide, but written in a kind of national and international level. Yeah. So, you know, if I look at the poor and destitute here or in America, you know, I see people who have no way to better themselves. Yeah, or at least it's very, very difficult, even with the best will in the world, even for the hardest worker. You know, society and so on is very much set against you, and a lot of people fail. You know, America's even worse for us for people getting themselves up out of poverty, and yet that's the American dream. So then, to bring that onto the sort of national and international stage, you look at these third world countries, and you know, I wouldn't completely dismiss other factors, but I would say, you know, they have been exploited historically. They've ended up stuck with bad leaders. And some of that's to do with the Cold War. Some of that's just because that's what happens sometimes. International debt is a big problem. It stops them being able to grow. But then there's a few success stories. South Africa, not doing quite so well lately, but it has done quite well. Nigeria's reasonably wealthy, doing all right. And hopefully we'll see more of that in the future.
Just regarding South Africa, I think, I'm not sure of the stats, but I think there's essentially a genocide against whites going on in South Africa.
Now, you saw my video about white genocide, so there is something going on in South Africa, and it's ugly and it's racially based. I don't know whether I would still call it genocide. It's that other country, Zimbabwe. There, I think you might have a case for
Yeah.
for white genocide. South Africa, I'm not. I could be convinced, but I'm not convinced yet. I don't think it's organized. I don't think it has state sanction in the way that Zimbabwe does.
So yeah, obviously reject that white genocide is taking place.
We disagree on definitions. Is basically the thing. Unless people are being dealt with in a systematic, organized, governmentally sanctioned manner, I would be very reluctant to call it genocide.
What do you think of this? I mean, blacks and Muslims, they are essentially ancient racial enemies. Throughout history, we've always fought each other. Do you think it was a good idea to let these people who they clearly are like haters, or they think that we owe them everything? Do you think it was a good idea to let these people into our nations?
Okay, I don't agree that we owe people anything. I mean, I don't believe in original sin, and I don't think crimes can be transferred. Whatever my ancestors may or may not have done, I didn't do anything. So why are you holding me responsible for it?
Yeah.
As regards coming into this country, I mean, Indian immigrants have come in and they've become very productive members of the community here. They've assimilated well. The Sikhs and so on, got tons of respect for the Sikhs. And the Gurkhas that have come over more recently, a lot of them settled near me in places like Reading, and they're very, very industrious. They've incorporated into the community. I think the West Indian community, at least the original sort of generations that came in, did the same. But I don't know so much about Africa. I used to spend a lot of time in London in a lot of the poorer neighborhoods, so I would hang out with people and would get to know them. I didn't really have any problems with them. And the same with the people from Islamic nations that had moved here as well. I mean, a lot of them, we're getting plastered on a Friday night with the rest of us, and, stopping up for a kebab or a bacon sandwich first thing in the morning, whatever, and didn't take their religion or anything that seriously. So it's hard. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, just let me finish up quickly. I don't know what is going on at the moment with the radicalization, because I think the people who came here first, and maybe the kids that they had, seem to become part of British society. But now it's the grandkids and the new immigrants don't seem to have the same attitude of wanting to be part of the culture. There's a lot of self-segregation going on, which I don't think helps. I don't think it's all down to Middle Eastern policy, but I don't think that helps. I do think Islam as a religion is a problem. But I think that the best way to deal with that is kind of similar to how the Soviet Union was dealt with, just to show people that you have a better quality of life here, and our way of doing things is in many ways better.
Do you not think it's because multiracialism and multiculturalism is just a total and complete failure, and that there's a reason why our forefathers never let non-whites in over thousands of years we've been a nation, and it's just a complete failure? Is that the reason?
Whites are divided up into various races. Britain's been invaded and taken over by Anglo-Saxons, Normans, Vikings, Celts, Picts. Our history is actually pretty mongrel.
Yes, but they were
they're all white. But
yeah.
I would say, that's still a racial distinction, and we used to all hate each other, even if we were white. So there's the same stuff there.
What interests me and my white nationalist mates on YouTube and that is you're obviously intelligent. Do you ever think about what is going to happen when we are a minority in our own nations? This
is where our fundamental difference is. I think I see culture and knowledge and that as being of primary importance. Race means nothing to me. That's why I also have exceptions to people like Black Lives Matter or Nation of Islam. These people who put race at the forefront, but they're talking about non-white races, because to me it's just not important compared to culture. If there's an Indian guy who's grown up in Croydon or whatever, went to Oxford University, he's as English as anybody else, really, and very much likely to be. Okay, maybe he's got a 6-armed statue in his house, but what difference does that make at the end of the day? He's taken on our values, he's become part of our society, and he's then perpetuating that culture into the future. So for me, it's the memes, not the genes.
So you disagree? I mean, I'd say that culture and race are totally connected and intertwined.
And I would disagree.
So what? Strongly disagree.
Yeah. Save to the extent that human beings have a common genetic history, and there's influences from that on all of our cultures, I think. So they tend to be hierarchical, and they tend to be cooperative in one way or another. But that's us as a species rather than race, which is a distinction I don't see as particularly meaningful unless you're getting an organ transplant or worrying about sickle cell anemia. Outside of those edge cases, it just doesn't seem to have that much of an effect.
Well, what do you feel like when, I mean, just as animals, as creatures, we instinctively want to protect as women and children. When you hear of all the rape cases and things like that, does that twinge anything or like prick any kind of instinctive like protective urge in you? Or I mean, like as I see it, with other leftists I've spoken to, they seem to have created like a barrier from these things, what just block them out.
I don't think a lot of these people who call themselves leftists are leftists. As someone who's studied history and politics, has had a lifelong interest in it, I view left-wing values as being essentially that people should be treated the same, equality before the law, and so on. So I look at things like the rape gangs and so on that we've had here, and I'm fucking enraged, and I'm especially enraged that the reason they didn't they didn't get caught for so long was because people were afraid of being called racist.
So it does anger you, then.
Oh, absolutely, and it's a cultural thing. Partly the religion, partly the places these people came from, and then that's compounded by the fact that people are too afraid to treat them the same way we would a white gang, a white Christian gang doing the same thing. And so they get away with it. We can't let this stupid sensitivity get in the way of justice, because equality before the law doesn't only mean rights and freedoms, it also means punishments and sanctions, so they should be treated exactly the same as we would anybody else. But that's not what happened. So that's the aspect that worries me, in that we've abandoned this idea of treating people the same, and we're now granting special exceptions, and we're worried about our image rather than seeking justice. That's the aspect that worries me. As to bringing people in, it does worry me, but it worries me because of the culture more than the race. I would be as concerned about Muslims from the Balkans who are white, as I would from anywhere else, because I think it's more the culture. But then I've known wonderful, good, lovely Muslims. They were not very good Muslims, but they were good people, So it's possible for people to assimilate and be productive and great, lovely people.
Do you not ever think about, I mean, like as a white nationalist, I think about stuff like this a lot. Just what we could have been now if we had stayed a 100% white nation. Just imagine where we would be right now. We'd possibly be colonizing the moon, or I might be exaggerating a bit there. We'd have gleaming cities. We'd be safe. There'd be no terrorism. As NHS, it'd be strong. As welfare state, it'd be strong. Do you not ever think about that?
So again, I would disagree that race has much to do with it. I look back at when Britain was the strongest it ever was. So like the Victorian era, when we were at the height of our empire, fifth of the planet under our boot heel. And as empires go, we were pretty nice compared to the Belgians or the Germans. We were actually not by no means perfect. We killed a lot of people and did a lot of awful shit, but compared to the other options, we were primarily a trading power. So we were probably the least worst option. But that was all reliant on these other nations. It was reliant on the wealth of India. It was reliant on Irish workers coming across the sea. It was reliant on settling Canada, Australia, all these other places. So whereas, going back to my example of China, because that was so insular, because it did not expose itself to other cultures and other ideas and so on, a tiny little island like Japan was able to just steamroller it when it came to the time. So I think we drew strength historically from our exposure to other cultures and nations and the wealth and power that existed there. And I think this is something that makes me unpopular in leftist circles, but I don't think our colonialism was entirely bad. There's a lot that was bad about it, but we took the telegraph, we took the railways, we took parliamentary democracy into a lot of these countries.
Yeah.
And that was it wasn't entirely one-sided, is all I'm saying. There was a lot that was bad about it as well, obviously, but we basically built the infrastructure in a lot of these nations that enabled them to become second world nations. But I think we draw strength most of the time from when we interact with others. I mean, so just finish up. You were talking about the NHS and so on. We're reliant on foreign workers to fill out the nursing and so on. We have an aging population. If we didn't have immigrants to do these jobs and to produce money, we would be rather impoverished. There's other ways around that. Encourage people to fuck more, but but the way things are, we're reliant on that.
All right. What do you think about, like, you see this a lot now, blacks and even Muslims saying that they created science and that we as whites stole science from them, and even that non-whites built Britain and built America?
Okay, some of that's hyperbole, some of it's nonsense, some of it comes from racist ideologies, and some of it has a germ of truth to it. So as regards Africa, there were city-states and so on, but they did not get to that higher level of civilization particularly. It's kind of like a bit like South America. They were really good at certain things, not so good at others. I would suggest you read a book called Guns, Germs and Steel by Jared Diamond, which kind of explains why Europe became so dominant, why it developed in the way that it did. I can't go into it here, but to all your listeners or anyone else watching this later, it's a really good book for explaining these kind of things.
Right.
Now, the Islamic nations, they were advanced for their time for a while. There's a great presentation by Neil deGrasse Tyson, which should be on YouTube somewhere. Where I think it's called Naming Rights, where he's talking about how the Islamic nations created algebra. They named all these stars. They were really good at optics and so on, and then it all went wrong for them. Well, before it went wrong for them, they were quite a multiculturalist nation. They allowed Jews and others to live amongst them. They were quite cosmopolitan. They weren't quite so fundamentalist in their religion. So it was while they were more open and accepting and pluralist that they were in their golden age. Yeah. And then it's when the clerics, I can't remember the name of the particular one, but he basically decided that mathematics were of the devil. Yeah. And that just brought all that advancement to an end. And then that allowed us through the Renaissance to then take on the knowledge from them that we'd recovered during the Crusades and to build on that and to get ourselves up out of our own religious mire from the Inquisition and so on, and get out, and technologically advance. And that's where we kind of took off ahead of everybody else.
Does it scare you, if that's the right word, that we eventually will be a Muslim majority nation?
I don't know that we will. There's a lot of alarmist statistics around. But and they're usually based on the fact that, you know, they have large families and they tend to breed more, as if they're going to overrun us like rabbits or something. But the fact is, you know, after the first couple of generations, once people are settled in, get a bit more wealth and so on, they tend not to breed as much. That seems to be why Western nations aren't breeding so much, because we're reasonably comfortable. So yeah, it might happen, but I don't think it will happen as fast as people think. I also think we'll probably see an Islamic Reformation before then. So I think we'll see more liberal interpretations of Islam. I think it'll slowly become safe to be a secularist or an atheist in some of these Islamic nations.
So, yeah, like, even I don't know if you watch these kinds of videos. I know not a lot of people do, because they do. Even like, I'm desensitized to them because I've watched them quite a lot, but I feel ill after watching them. Do you know the videos of the beheadings? And recently there was a video of a little Syrian kid being beheaded.
Yeah.
Like when you see things like that, and you know that they're growing in number, is it like, from your like leftist like mindset, does it just not bother you? Like, do you look at it as just wait and see what happens kind of thing? Like, nothing can be done, we'll just have to wait and see.
It bothers me immensely, because I'm concerned with the rights of everybody, and all rights stem from the right to life, you know. And I look at the terrible things Islam does and the terrible beliefs that are in it, and yeah, that worries me a lot. I don't think that just bombing people is going to work. I tend to look, like I said earlier, it's kind of Cold War example. We need to demonstrate that our culture is better in some ways, you know. And I think we do that by being more human, not less. I do think we should intervene sometimes. I do think we should fight sometimes, but I've been unconvinced by the recent conflicts because they seem to have just been making things worse.
Yeah.
Syria, I was on board with for a little while, but it's just turned into such a mess. I don't know how anything's gonna change with that. Iraq was pointless. Afghanistan had a point, but I think we've botched it horribly. And I just can't see the worth of staying embroiled in these things. We just seem to be making things worse there, and not providing any real solutions. I don't know what the answer is.
But does it not show you that there's some, and I'm not even just talking about non-whites here. I'm talking about the whites in power. Does it not show you that things are seriously like wrong or degraded? The fact that our governments went and helped the Islamists in these nations. Do you know, like, that's how incompetent they are.
Geopolitics is complicated. You never really know how things are going to go, but I mean, it's kind of business as usual, really. People fucking up to that degree. So I guess I'm cynical enough that it doesn't surprise me.
Well, at this point, it's
no longer surprising. I mean, most of this is, in my opinion, more to do with resources and containing China than it is to do with what they say it is to do with.
So just like from that angle, even if it is like about resources and stuff like that, do you not think the world is in a bad position now? Do you not think that as a race, it'd be a good idea to draw all his resources in and just use them on his own people?
I can see the argument for that, but that's also the argument that tends to lead to stagnations of cultures. I mean, when you look to, like, I've given the historical example of China again and again, but it stays true. When they were isolationist, they became weaker. America, when it was isolationist, was weaker. It was intervening in World War I and World War II that really turned it into an industrial and financial powerhouse. So I don't think isolation is the key. I think I would rather see us build up impoverished areas and help solve their problems and turn them into allies, kind of the way we did with Eastern Europe, rather than withdraw and just leave them to rot. I don't think it's a very charitable way to look at it. I don't think it's a very pragmatic way to go about it. I think it's better off to build everyone up.
Well, like when you look at non-white nations and just non-whites in generally, do you feel sympathy for them? Do you feel an urge to help them? And do you think that we as a race have an obligation to help them?
I don't see it. I just don't see it as a racial thing. You know, if I pass a homeless person in the street, I don't check what race they are. I judge whether they're genuinely homeless or whether they're just going to spend it on booze or drugs or whatever, and then maybe drop a couple of quid in his cup, you know, and you know, scale it up to a national level. You know, if we, metaphorically speaking, you know, give them a shave and a suit and a job interview, that's a better way to go about things, I think. But then you're going to have some people who can't be helped, and it's hard to know what to do in those circumstances.
It's just it's really like we talk about it a lot, like me and other white nationalists on here, just for leftist mindset. We find it hard to get in the mindset of your mind, another leftist's mind. Like, just not to feel this, like, just with a general situation, what's happening, like, we feel this primal, like, rage. I mean, like, the latest Islamic attacks, seeing dead white children, and that happening daily, and white kids in poverty, and all the other things. It's like a really primal rage what we feel. But you leftists just don't, like, you don't. Well, you said, but you do feel that. But
yeah.
But generally, you tend not to.
I can only speak for myself, in that when I'm trying to fix problems, I try to be dispassionate about it. I try to be objective.
Yeah.
I try to step back and think, okay, how would we actually solve this situation, rather than just getting angry. I mean, the anger is what will usually propel me into thinking we need to fix this. When it comes to these kind of attacks and things, it happens so much that I just kind of feel this kind of heavy sadness, because it's all so fucking predictable. You know how things are going to go. The moment you hear there's been an attack, they're going to deny it's anything to do with Islam. It's going to come out that he is something to do with Islam. Then people are going to make all kinds of apologies for it. Then maybe there'll be a hashtag. Maybe people will change their profile pictures on Facebook or whatever. And a few people will say some nice things, and then it'll all reset, ready for the next one. And it's just, my primary feeling at this point is more despair than anger, because nobody seems willing to address it. And as a leftist who sees problems with Islam and so on, I look at people like Sam Harris, Bill Maher, people like that who do speak up, and I see how they get treated, and it does make a lot of us afraid to speak up, because we get accused of being like you. So but we're coming at it from a cultural and religious perspective rather than a race one. That's the difference. But then we get accused of being racist anyway. So
that is something what we're going to ask you, because you are like pretty unique as a leftist in being for, well, in fact, are you for absolute freedom of speech? I am personally. Are you for absolute freedom of speech?
I'm pretty much a free speech fundamentalist, but I try to understand the other person's point of view. So I would say, all the way, apart from maybe direct appeals to violence.
And has that lost you a lot of friends, a lot of leftist friends?
Yeah, it has. It's had quite a negative impact on my career. I have dedicated trolls and harassers who follow me everywhere and give me shit about everything I do. So it's definitely a thing.
But it's like that, isn't it? It's like free speech, the simple act of saying what you think and saying reality and what you see. It's such a basic human desire and right, isn't it? And nothing can be done if people cannot say and think what they want. And I personally, and I said this in my videos, I think, as I see it, free speech and free thought is illegal in England and Europe now.
Yeah, the aspects of it. See, this is why I agreed to talk with you. You know, our viewpoints are wildly different. We don't agree on very much, but I think we should be able to talk and argue and disagree, and be reasonably civil about it, rather than screaming and throwing trash bins around or setting off fire alarms or whatever. Because I think if we have this conversation, we can see that we share concerns. We disagree maybe on how to deal with them, but we can see that the person on the other side is human and has reasons for thinking as they do. And maybe we can slightly change each other's mind a little bit. You know, that's productive in a way that shutting down conversations isn't.
Yeah. Right. To everyone in chat, if you've got any questions for James, just type them now and ask them. And just while you're doing that, James, can I just ask your thoughts on the Donald Trump?
Donald Trump. Okay. I think he's terrible. I also think Hillary's terrible. And I'm unsure whether an incompetent evil that can't get anything done is better or worse than a competent evil that can get things done. I applaud the way that he has wound people up. I applaud the way his campaign has managed to use the internet and made fun of people and opened up a lot of conversations and made a lot of people make fools of themselves. But I would not want him to be the man with his hand on the button.
So what do you feel is authoritarian? And
I see everyone says he's Hitler. I'm not convinced that he's Hitler. I think he will just say whatever it takes to get him elected. I think he's an egotistical moron. I think he's a populist windsock. He'll just say anything, do anything to be the best, the big man or whatever. So
does it not?
I find it hard to find him threatening, put it that way.
But do you not think it's like with the threats what we face, do you not, like from ISIS and all the others, do you not think that we need strength or some kind of like strength, and we need to be aggressive as a civilization, and we need those types of leaders?
Thing is, quietly, Obama's bombed the heck out of a lot of people, drone strikes and so on. There's been all kinds of operations and stuff going on. It's not like, the previous administration's full of doves or anything. So all Trump really brings to the table is bombastic rhetoric. And history tells me that's not necessarily a good thing. I look at the aftermath of Brexit here, what that's done to our discourse, to the experiences of people living here, and I would worry about the same thing, making race relations and so on in the States worse, even worse than Black Lives Matter is making them.
Do you think that physical race wars are inevitable, by the way? I mean, I personally would say that the race war against whites has already begun, psychologically, physically, demographically, financially, everything. But do you think physical race wars are going to come as non-whites become 50-60% of the population?
I don't think it's inevitable. I think it's very likely in the States, but the States has a very weird and unique situation in all this, in terms of politicization, in terms of arms, in terms of its wealth gap and lack of social investment and so on. So there's a degree of desperation and anger and violence that's just kind of inherent to the American national experience, I think, that makes it more likely there. We've had a couple of riots and looting incidents. That seems to happen every so often, but it's nothing like what they have in the States. So but I would blame all sides for that in the States. I don't think it's inevitable at all. I think I would just go back to what I said earlier. I think it's about the memes, not the genes. It's about the culture.
Someone's asking, is IQ important? Not like between the races. Would you put a lot of importance on that?
Okay, there's actually a lot to say on this. I'll try and keep it as short as possible. The old IQ tests were not very good, and they were differentiated by race because the questions were slightly cultural. So that led to some older studies which suggested that intelligence was inherently linked to race.
Right.
The newer IQ tests are more accurate, but they still show a slight disparity. As you guys probably know, people of Oriental extraction tend to have higher IQs than we do.
Yeah.
And so it goes on down through. But there are problems separating out that data from other factors. And this is always a problem with this kind of statistical data, because if you did it within this country, within our communities, for example, you'd find a lot of colored people taking the tests would be recent immigrants. Maybe they were malnourished in their childhood. A lot of them would be poor. That can lead to malnourishment. That can lead to malnourishment in white communities as well.
Yeah.
And that has a major negative effect on IQ. If you don't get proper nutrition when you're young, you're much less likely to be as smart as you could be when you get older. So you'd have to compensate for all these problems. Now, I'm not against studying this because I want to know. Personally, I don't believe that a proper study would show a differential by race once you compensated for all these issues. But I'd want to know. But it's such a political hot potato that nobody is really willing to do the studies properly. So you really would not agree that there is like biological differences in IQ between races, even just by looking at the civilizations. I mean, like the other day, if you type in black culture on YouTube, it shows you one example is this black dude, and he's basically blown into this cow's ass. And they've uploaded it as an example of black culture. But there's other things as well. Just looking at civilizations, does that alone, and also the crime statistics, does that not alone tell you that there is big racial differences? But we've done stupid things in the past and believed stupid things as well. I mean, people used to believe disease was caused by smells and things, for example. So, if you go back, there's plenty of examples of white cultures believing nonsense and doing stupid shit. That's not unique. It's just, well, and look how long it took for technology to really take off. We were basically the same kind of agrarian hitting each other with club society until the Renaissance, and a lot of these areas haven't had the same kind of input, don't have the same kind of education and so on that we've had. If we give everyone more equal opportunities, maybe we'll see a flowering of these other cultures. What was the second half of the question?
Well, I think I got into aggression, the crime.
Crime statistics. Are you talking about within different racial communities in our country or the States?
Well, in all white nations, really. Well, really, America and England mainly, but everywhere, really.
Okay, yeah. So I've gotten into arguments with a few Black Lives Matter types about this because they keep insisting that the cops are particularly out to get black people. But then you point at the differential in statistics, like the black community in the States is much more likely to be poor and much more likely to be involved in crime. Now, you would put that down to some kind of racial differential, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, whereas I would put it down to wealth and class issues because they tend to be poorer. Poor communities tend to be more criminal. Poor communities and more criminal communities tend to run into the police more. Then there's cultural issues as well. In the States. So these are factors that I think are much more important than race. I mean, once you control for wealth and class, a huge chunk of the difference in arrest rates and so on just disappears. Poor whites are in pretty much equally as bad a position as poor blacks in the States, but they don't get the same kind of publicity and so on. I see it as an issue of wealth and class, not of race.
So you believe in equality?
Yeah. Equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. I believe everyone should have the same rights and as equal an opportunity as we can provide them, so that everyone has the chance at least to achieve their potential. So equality, not homogeneity.
But do you also believe it in the way that all races are equal? And what I'm getting at is like when they say because blacks are not doing as well in some places or they're committing more crime, they blame it on because we're all equal. It must be white racism because we're all equal, and that is like causing a lot of problems. So do you believe it in that way as well?
I don't believe in blaming it on that, because I think that's treating people equally and social investment, basically giving people opportunities, other ways to go at things. I think that's the potential salvation of these communities. So I don't believe it's the problem. I believe equality is the solution.
All right, everyone. So, well, just to like start wrapping things up, because I think I've been talking for about an hour now. I'm not sure
Yeah,
how
about that, I think.
How do you think? How do you see the world in 50 years, and how do you want it to be in 50 years?
50 years. So that would be 2066. You know, a month or two ago, I could have given you pretty detailed ideas of how I think things are going to go and how I'd want them to go. Now I'm just unsure of everything. I think we'll continue to see larger blocks of nations coming together, despite everything that's happened between us in Europe. I think that project will continue. I think North America will tie closer together. I think Russia will consolidate its power with its former states. I think China will continue to consolidate, though that bubble's going to burst at some point. I think the Pacific nations are going to come together. So I think we're going to see these larger kind of economic and political blocks emerge, which is both good and bad, because if you trade with someone, you're less likely to have fights with them. I think the big battle over the next decade and into that period is going to be about free speech, free communication, because we now live in an era where the public square is now owned by private companies and they're controlling what you can say. So censorship, our primary concern when it comes to censorship isn't so much the government anymore, it's private companies like Facebook and Google and so on. And I think that's going to continue. I think we'll get into kind of an arms race between people trying to communicate and people trying to stifle communication.
Do you think that, like, because like you're a games designer, aren't you? I think you said.
Yeah.
Can you? I mean, this is maybe not that much political, but do you see a time coming where, I mean, like virtual reality is just finally starting to become advanced enough to be usable and good? Do you see a time in the next few decades where people essentially are just living on the internet and like basically on some kind of drip and literally living their lives on the internet? And that's it. And just like Google, just like overseeing it all, kind of like that kind of utopian kind of.
Rather than retreating into virtual reality, I think what we'll see is information space becoming integrated with the outside world. I mean, this is going to sound really stupid, but hear me out. Think about Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
Now everyone is playing it, and it uses augmented reality. It uses GPS. It overlays the Pokemon on the real world. That's the kind of thing we're going to see, except it'll be kind of like geotagged Google. So, you look at a building and information about its history and so on will come up, or people will be able to overlay fantasy worlds on the world around them, that sort of thing. So I don't think we'll retreat into our bubbles. I think we'll take the games and, the internet and all of that out into the world.
So
the next 50 years, they look pretty grim to me, but not the end of the world.
When you said that, when you just said then that lately you're not sure about things, is that because you are seeing cracks in just the multiculturalism, multiracialism, and you're seeing the like horrific possibilities what is coming? Is it anything to do with that? Like because you said lately you're not sure. Is it because of what's happening, like with daily Islamic attacks, which are basically daily now. And
it's more the kind of fault lines I see opening up on the larger scale. So, you know, it's not the bombings or whatever. It's more the way our politics is shifting, the way our culture is shifting. The censorship really concerns me. The potential scarcity of resources in the near future, that worries me a great deal. There's a lot of talk at the moment about what they're calling post-factual politics.
I've not heard about, but
well, you look at someone like Trump, or you look at the Brexit vote, and you know, a lot of the political campaigns lately, on all sides, really, have been characterized by lies and bullshit, and it takes effort to work out who's telling the truth about anything. And lots of people don't make the effort, and to a lot of people the truth doesn't seem to matter. You know, it's the rhetoric. It's does this person say the right thing, feel right, you know? And democracy relies on an informed populace, and I don't think we have that anymore, and it's everybody's fault. That worries me.
What do you think about this? Like, you're big on free speech and what's happening on the internet with freedom of speech and things like that. But what do you think of this? Because we are a multiracial nation, increasingly, because multiracialism essentially means chaos, the powers are having to grab more and more powers in order to keep the whole mess together. And because of that, that is why we're losing speech, because they can't risk anyone saying something that is going to make non-whites kick off. Is that a connection what you make or agree with, or just totally reject?
In my experience, it's much more than the minority communities. It's the guilt-ridden middle-class white kids who kick off, you know? Yeah. So I don't know, and I don't think multiculturalism has to mean chaos either. And I think we can have a common set of cultural values that would allow people to live alongside each other without problems. And most of the problems we're having at the moment come from Islam, because it's a very, very evangelical religion that seeks to push itself onto others.
Yeah,
we need it. It needs a reformation. It needs to be softened and blunted in the same way that we have done to Judaism and Christianity.
But James, the thing is, like, but what you essentially are saying is that should be met with love and tolerance, whereas I would say something like Islam, which is like, as I said, I see it as a brown pan-racial entity, but even without that, it is an aggressive foreign ideology. Well,
okay. I don't think it should be met with love and tolerance. I think we should take the piss out of it. I think we should jail people who use it as an excuse for things. I think we should pursue, genital mutilation cases and so on with the same kind of energy and anger and as much punishment as we would if anyone else did it. Right. If multicultural means they have to accept our culture as well. Yeah. And our culture. Okay, let me put it like this. Controversial for me to say it, but I consider Western liberal, small L liberal culture to be better than Middle Eastern Islamic culture.
Yeah.
So, I think, and in amongst those values that our culture has, that I think make it superior, are things like tolerance. But that doesn't mean we should let ourselves be ridden roughshod over. We have to insist that they also be tolerant. Yeah.
Yeah. But do you not think that every single bit of weakness we've showed, it just emboldens them?
This is really difficult to find a handle on.
See, like as a working class English lad, whether it's online or otherwise, I see these Muslims and blacks and the hatred they have for us, and they think that we owe them. They think this nation's theirs. They boast about raping us women and things like that. They literally, to me and other white nationalists here on YouTube, they are literally a foreign army, and we just feel like rage towards them.
It's again, it's by no means all of them. A lot of the cultural attitudes are more widespread than maybe we'd like, but that kind of group, the ones talking about raping your women or whatever, some of those are bound to be trolls, quite frankly, and the others are just going to be a horrible, nasty minority, just as it is in any other group. But
it's not just non-whites. I mean, what do you think of these whites who are so self-hating they literally just want everything to be destroyed? Have you got any theories as to how it's happened? Such like vicious self-hatred.
The guilt is a big part of it. I came through education before that kind of interpretation came through, though. The whole guilt thing. Though there was some of that. I like to think the education I had was reasonably balanced. We looked at the good and the bad, but now it seems to be much more ideological. We can do nothing right. There was no good side to anything that we did, and to even suggest that there was is anathema.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's right. I don't think any.
So you are proud of some of us' heritage as a race?
Where I was born and what color I am is purely an accident of geography. But I look at democracy. I look at the concept of human rights. I look at accomplishments like the European Union. That's going to make me unpopular with some of you guys, but
yeah, probably.
But I look at all these things we've managed, but I see it as cultural. So, and I didn't do any of that. So it's kind of proud isn't the right term. These things are good, and I want to see them continue. So that's kind of my attachment to it. This appears to be the best way we currently have of doing things.
Well,
I'd like to keep doing it.
Well, on democracy, and I say this all the time, we no longer live in a democracy, as far as I see. Not really.
I would agree. Both the US and the UK were pretty much run by rich, moneyed interests at this point. Both of our electoral systems are screwed. We need some kind of root and branch reform, get money out of politics. We need to get rid of the first past the post system over here. We need proportional representation so that people's actual views are reflected in Parliament. We need to get rid of the Lords if we want to reclaim any kind of real idea of democracy. What we have now is barely a democracy, but barely a democracy is better than the alternative.
There's a comment here. I don't know if you'll find this offensive or if you have any response to it. Tay AI says, "I admire your patience, England. This guy is a total cook." Like cook.
Well, I assure him I'm not a cuck. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, I'd say that. I mean, there's people like Kevin Logan, who I can't I can't actually stand watching him because it's so. Do you see us in the same bracket as people like that and others like him?
Like I said, I don't think they're left in the same sense that I am. A lot of their viewpoints I don't see as leftist because they're trying to set themselves up as a moral authority. They do not see people as equal. They want to set up special conditions and special dispensations for people. They want to abrogate basic human rights like freedom of speech. So to me, they're not really adhering to any leftist philosophy that I've studied.
They're not ever really.
So to me, I mean, the only things me and them might agree on is some of the goals and that we want people to be equal. But I think the way they're going about it virtually guarantees people won't be equal, and maybe we'll agree on some economic issues. But on the things that really, really matter to me, like free expression, we're at absolute loggerheads.
Do you get into a lot of arguments with people like that?
Yeah, more than I do your lot, honestly.
Yeah.
But I don't tend to run into you guys so much. I tend to run into these people more.
Yeah.
And they come after me actually. So
what and do they get? Is it quite vicious? Like just because you're gone
Oh,
off.
it's incredibly vicious. You just have to. This is the thing. You just have to disagree on one point with them, and you're the devil.
Yeah.
And they won't listen to you explain your point of view or why you've had it. They won't even try to change your point of view. If they're presenting something that you reject, it's just educate yourself, shitlord. You know, they won't make the effort to try and educate you. I mean, I said I'm an atheist. I get into arguments with creationists. When we get into arguments about evolution, I see it as my job to try and educate them, you know, on why I believe as I do, what the evidence is, and so on. But you know, if I run into a particularly rabid radical feminist or whatever, and we get into an argument over something like, I don't know, objectification or free expression or whatever, they're not willing to make the effort to argue the points that they're making.
Yeah.
And as someone who is an activist in other areas, that just seems bizarre to me. Education's the job of an activist, you know, to let people know why you believe as you do and to try and convince them through evidence to agree with you in some way. But they don't do that. It's just fuck you and then they block you or whatever. That seems counterproductive to me.
What are your thoughts on feminism? Is that something what you think about a lot? Do you see it as a big, particularly, well, one of the main problems of the like degradation of society? Do you see it as a main problem?
I think it was a good thing for a very long time. I think we basically have equality in every meaningful sense in Western society now.
Yeah.
Maybe to the point that the pendulum has swung the other way. I see the kind of things that they keep arguing for and arguing about as being pointless or counterproductive. I don't like the censorship. You know, I've got friends who work in adult entertainment or sex workers and so on, and you'd think feminists would be all about supporting them, and helping them, and it's not. It's absolutely not. They seem to be rabidly against them. You know, they want to censor pornography, which puts, you know, people I know out of work.
But that's the thing, isn't it? But like, it used to be the conservatives who did that, and it's just now totally done a 180, isn't it?
Yeah,
now...
well, this last bit of censorship that we had in this country was to do with video streaming pornography and so on. It's basically it's put a bunch of people I know basically out of business to try and take the government to court. But that was an alliance between the conservatives and some radical feminists, including Gail Dines. You know, you'd never think these kind of people would be in bed together, metaphorically speaking, but they were, and they pushed through the censorship agenda, and it's hurt women. So, you know, what are you doing?
And it's like that when they're on. I mean, like, I don't read The Sun or any like newspapers really, not like material papers. But when we're getting on at page 3, things like that, and models as well. These women, it's actually a really empowering position for women to be in, and they say it themselves. They feel empowered.
Yeah, there's a few people who leave the business under a cloud and have nasty things to say about it, but by and large, you know, it's choice. You know, if you can do what you love, if you can make money doing something that you want to do, great. Why is anyone trying to stop anyone doing that? Who does it hurt? And if you think it genuinely does hurt anybody, prove it, and then maybe I'll change my position. But yeah, it's just so little of it seems to be based on any science or an actual desire to help women. It seems to be more based on a desire to control people.
Do you think that, I mean, as a white nationalist, I'm not a men's right activist, and I don't like the MGTOW lot, but as I see it, we've lost control of us women, and that's partly why things are out of control, because women are beautiful, they're different to us, we're filling in each of us weaknesses and strengths, but when we're in political power, it is a disaster. So as men, we need to be, as white men, we need to be men again, and like rein them in, not dominate them, but like, well, gently dominate them, but just not like bring the natural balance of the male-female dynamic back. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I would disagree with a lot of that. The domination thing sounds okay, but only with consent.
Yeah.
God, where do I even start with that? No, I don't think we need to control anybody. I want people to be free because I'm an anarchist, right? Yeah. So women should be free to do what they want, but what they want should be allowed to include being a traditional housewife or whatever, if that's what they want to do, you know?
Yeah.
Leave everyone as free as possible to live the kind of life that they want to lead. So long as it doesn't hurt anybody, it's nobody else's business. So, you know, if you want to get into that kind of relationship with a woman who wants to get into that kind of relationship, more power to you. I'm not going to get in your way. Go and have fun. If someone else wants to fuck a different guy every night or whatever, I don't care either. It's not hurting me. Have fun, love. Do what you want. And the same goes for anybody else. As long as nobody's getting hurt, I don't see a reason to interfere.
So you basically want there to be no driving force to society. I mean, like, I'd want a white nationalist entity, not an old-fashioned one, a modern one, what embraces technology. Like, I'd want to see full work automation, and so work was not something that was desirable nor needed.
That's very likely to happen.
But I'd want a strong white nationalist entity. All non-whites would be deported. Like, that's just, and all resources would go to his own people, and that'd be the driving force. But you, like, want it to be totally rudderless type thing, don't you?
No, we agree on wanting science and technology to keep moving forward. And I see science and technology as a way of bringing the whole human race up and learning more and exploring more, making people's lives better. That would be the driving force for me. You brought up the automation thing. I mean, it's almost certain that work is going to become a thing of the past within the next century, and we need to find a way to tackle that, because the kind of economic and political structures we have at the moment are not going to survive that kind of paradigm shift, you know. So that's going to be interesting. Obviously, I would disagree with you on the you know, deport all the foreigners and you know, everything else. But you know, a technological advanced nation striving to become more technological, to know more, to become bigger, and to bring everybody up. But I would extend that globally. I want to bring the world up. I want to bring humanity to a higher level.
That might be the key difference. I mean, like, as a white nationalist, I mean, like, as a lad, I'm a decent lad. I'm not a nasty person. I don't like that. But when I look at Africa, I feel virtually no sympathy for it. This is going to sound really bad, but I don't feel much sympathy for them. I just feel sympathy for the poor white working class kids who've been failed. So but you have a global outlook. You want to spread it out.
Yeah, but some of that is enlightened self-interest, meaning that we would benefit from building up these other nations. You know, if you build powerful trading partners, then both sides profit. You know, this sounds weird coming from a left-wing socialist talking about the market and money and so on, but it works even without capitalism. You know, even if you have stronger partners, you both gain, you both benefit. You've got more people, right? So say we invested a lot of money in education in an African nation, yeah. So that country would then have a new set of really educated graduates. Maybe they could start to deal with the problems in their own nation. Maybe they could start to make new discoveries and so on that would benefit the world as a whole and would in return benefit us. Plus, they, you know, if they build up the economy there, they've got less reason to emigrate here, maybe put less strain on our resources and so on that way. But, you know, I don't think it's one or the other. I think we can invest in our own working class who have been left to rot since Thatcher, really. We can do that, and we can help other people. You know, you can help people in Africa much more cheaply, basically, than you can people here, because their problems are so big at this time that any help makes a big difference, and that would feed back to us. But the plight of young white boys on council estates does very much concern me.
Yeah, and just regarding, like, you talk about Thatcher, like, as a northern lad, I have some kind of alignment with when it comes to stuff like that, because even though I'm like radical white nationalist, I'm not right wing or conservative. So I'm pro welfare. I'm anti austerity and things like that.
Yeah.
So I've never liked the Conservatives. But yeah, regarding council estate, white kids, poor kids, that is like a focus of mine. Yeah, that is. I mean,
Yeah.
just to see the destruction, because I connect that with the direct cost, which is hundreds of billions of 5 decades of multiracialism and immigration. The total cost of it, and even the austerity, what we're under now, I connect that to decades of multiracialism and immigration.
Okay, so this is the big thing that really worries me. In that the crappy way that we approach these problems is what creates kids like you. I don't want to be rude, but that's
no, sorry.
That's what concerns me. Because poor people, poor working class, basically have so little. The fighting over what's left becomes really vicious, and to me, this kind of racial consciousness, this nativist versus immigrant consciousness, gets in the way of class consciousness. I would rather see poor blacks, poor whites, poor immigrants working together to put pressure on government and to demand more resources and more assistance that should be given to them on the basis of need, regardless of where they're from. You know?
Yeah,
so,
but honestly, looking at the situation, I mean, I'm assuming that you've got a few, like you're in a few private social media groups with leftists and so on. Like you've seen the views of non-whites. Like surely you see that is never going to happen. Any kind of like coming together. I mean, like I personally do not want it to. I want us to stay separate. I don't want assimilation. I don't want to. It's impossible for us to live with a races. I think.
I disagree, and that's both from personal experience and just looking at things on a societal basis. And it really does upset me. It really does upset and worry me that you're all at each other's throats instead of uniting against the common enemy, which is this austerity, this demonization of the poor that goes on. I've got disabled friends and people, who have lost friends to suicide and so on because of the troubles with ATOS, all the rest of it. These things affect the poor, whoever the poor happen to be.
Yeah, and things like that, they like really discuss, and the bedroom tax, which is that's but I and other white nationalists, I always connect that with what multiculturalism has done to us. I mean, just think of a total cost of this entire multiracial project of accommodating this unnatural system. That cost, that is why we're in this situation. So I always put blame on not just on the non-whites themselves, but on the traitorous politicians, kind of thing.
Yeah, I would put the blame on the politicians, and I would put the blame on classism. And I really wish, I know it's a vain hope, but I really wish you guys would work together across racial lines on these issues. And I would see that as a way of building friendships and solidarity and getting more of a voice, more of a say, and addressing some of these issues. But yeah, that's a faint vain hope. And it's, I argue this to the other side as well, but they're completely mired in their own racial politics. All they want to hear about is that racial minorities are oppressed. They don't want to hear about the race and class issues or the problems that people have in common. They just want to put it all down to racism. So yeah, I get stuck in the middle on this one.
All right, man. We'll wrap it up at that then. If unless there's anything else, I
got one question for you.
Oh yeah, if you've got any questions.
So you're pretty anti-immigration, yeah?
Yep.
What about Romanians and Poles who are white?
If they are quote unquote racist, then I like them. If they are anti-immigration and anti-multiculturalism, I like them. And the white nationalist thing, but I also think that separate white ethnicities deserve to be preserved, type thing. So ethnic English, which I'm guessing you would deny it exists, ethnic English people.
There was actually there was a really interesting article in the news earlier. Apparently, Britain's still divided up into its old Saxon tribes, basically. So yeah, basically we stick to our own, even within our whiteness, apparently, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, but when it comes to, I mean, like with a Polish, I mean, the other day Poland destroyed its racial hate speech laws, but racial discrimination thing. They banned that and they took it away. So that shows me that the Polish are racially aware. So that makes me like them. On the other hand, I know that it causes problems, kind of thing. But on the whole, I don't have much problems. But then again, they're most likely all voted to stay in the EU. So it's like it's a little bit nuanced on that.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
I just find it funny that you're okay with immigrants so long as they're racist.
Yeah,
that just tickles me.
Yeah, if a nationalist, if a anti-Islam and stuff like that, then I'm okay. If a pro-multiculturalism, then I'd say that we should be deported, basically.
Okay, that was all I
had. All right, but yeah, I just want to say thank you for coming on, because like you're the first, like I said, I've wanted to have a leftist on for quite a while, and you're the first one who's come on. So thank you for coming on.
No, like I said, I think talking's important, even if we disagree. And obviously we disagree on a hell of a lot of stuff, but there are a few things we seem to agree on, and hopefully I've given you some stuff to think about, and you've given me some stuff to think about. So
yeah,
it's all good.
And hopefully sometime we can do it again. Maybe.
Yeah, sure.
And
get some more questions from your mates and stuff. And
yeah. Do you just want to tell people, if you want to, where they can find you?
I doubt you'll want to find me, but I'm Grimachu on Twitter. My website for my games company is postmortemstudios.wordpress.com, and you can find the other ways to get in touch with me on there if you want to. I'm generally happy to talk about this stuff with anybody, provided they're reasonably polite. So, yeah.
All right, hey, nice one, man. All right, we'll wrap it up there then. So, everyone listening, as always, thank you for listening and for taking part in the chat. And I will speak to you all soon. So, I'll see you later, guys, and I'll see you later, James, mate. And thank you.
No problem.